I'd like to sort of begin tonight and say thank you very much to the Ability Center. We had an opportunity just to have a brief overview of the tremendous services that they're being performed by the folks. So it was great to hear from Stuart, and really think it's a fantastic facility. And we were sort of saying, hey, it's great when you walk around that you see young kids and seniors, all sorts of people who are coming here for programs and services, and that's terrific and great to see. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have with us this evening MPP Jennifer French from Oshawa. Want to wave the hand there? Fantastic, thank you. And Mayor Adrian Foster from Clarington. Metrolinx is committed to engaging with an... Oh, I'm sorry? Fantastic. Mayor Carter, welcome. The last time we saw Mayor Carter, we were driving around and he didn't have that beautiful blue suit on, so that's why I didn't recognize him. And any other folks, VIPs that I didn't acknowledge? I don't want to make that mistake. We got a room full of them. Okay, fantastic. Metrolinx is committed to engaging with and informing our neighbors, our customers in the community about our progress as we move forward with planning, building, and operating the region's transit network. We invite all feedback regarding our services and our projects, and we do this in an open and transparent way through sessions like this. I want to thank you again for your interest in joining us here this evening. Before we begin, as we do with everything at Metrolinx, is we begin with a safety briefing. We want to make sure that in the event of an emergency and we have to evacuate the premises, that we can get out of here very safely and securely. So we go through a bit of a checklist that in all our briefings to make sure that we know who's accountable for doing what. And so I'm going to do that for everyone right now. So in the event of emergency, my colleague Annalise Cherney is going to call 911. Do you want to put the hand up? Great. Mark Childs, he is first aid. He'll be do the first aid with us. And escorting the first responders will be Dorothy Wall, who's sitting next to Annalise. If we need a fire extinguisher or an AED is a defibrillator. Defibrillators are actually going to be downstairs at the desk. And we have a first aid kit and fire extinguisher are just outside this room here. If we have to evacuate, we didn't ask people to exit the room orderly. Head back down and walk down the stairs and out into the parking lot, and we're going to muster there, gather to make sure we're all safe there. Invite also everyone, please, if you could just look to your left and look to your right to identify who's sort of sitting next to you, so that in the event if we're outside, we can sort of say, hey, is everyone accounted for? So thank you very much, and that's an important thing that we'd like to do to cover off. Okay, everyone's got each other's back. That's terrific. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our format and expectations for this evening's event. So this event has been designed to allow for as many opportunities for question and feedback as important. We'll take any and all questions that folks have got tonight. Those who were not able to participate here this evening and actually join us physically, they had an opportunity, and as did everyone, to submit questions in advance. And also people had an opportunity to vote on those questions to see which were the most popular and of interest to the people here. For those of you in the room, if you'd like to ask questions, we've got a microphone right here, and folks can begin to sort of stand behind the mic and get themselves situated, and we'll call upon you as well. I'd ask that in each of the cases that we keep the questions as short as possible, so that it gives an opportunity for as many people to ask questions as we can throughout the evening. We'll take as many as we can during the course of this evening. We also have an opportunity for those people who are watching online, what we call live streaming. So we'll take some questions from people who are watching online and want to ask them of our panel as well. We're going to rotate through those types of questions. Probably giving a little bit of preference to the folks that have taken the time and made the effort to come out here this evening, but we will get through as many questions as we possibly can. We've got sessions scheduled from now till 8:30. If folks want to stay a little bit after, if they're a little bit shy about getting up and asking questions, certainly we've got a lot of folks here from Metrolinx here who can stay at the end and answer questions you may have. We also make a firm commitment to ensure that all your questions are answered. So the questions we take tonight, the questions we get online, the questions that come to us in any format, we commit to providing the answers and publishing them on our website within about 3 weeks. So I'd now like to invite President and CEO Phil Verster to introduce himself and the other Metrolinx panel members.
Yes, thank you very much to everyone for being here tonight. So if I can sort of explain just briefly where these types of events, such as tonight, comes from. About a year ago, as a senior management team, we decided that transparency of Metrolinx's decisions to the communities is much more important than what it may have been perceived before. Our boards are accessible to anyone, and anyone can attend those. But what we've sensed is that there are more people that would like to ask questions, like to understand what it is we do, how we do it, where we do it, and what the decisions are. And we started what we call Ask Metrolinx, which is a public session, town hall session, also live streamed, also invitations to people to send questions in beforehand. And this is what we did over a year now. And a couple of weeks ago, we were out in Kitchener. And prior to that, for many months, we did the same in Toronto. And it was important because there are so many questions and issues at Toronto. But we're out on the road. And it's fantastic for us to be here in Durham. And we work closely with Durham, with the region, and with everyone in this region. And we've got exciting things happening in transit, you may have noticed. And there are very exciting things for transit in the Durham region as well, which we're going to share with you tonight. And so from our side, from the commitment from me and my team, half my team is sitting over here. The only reason why this half is here is that mostly the questions are about what this half does. We've got another half of the top team that sits over there. And they are as important as this half, but they just normally get fewer questions. Tonight we have one of our team members here, Dorothy. Dorothy, would you like to just stand up so people can see who's Dorothy? Dorothy is our lawyer, and she's asking that anyone with legal questions, please ask them tonight. She can't wait to answer them. As lawyers go, you know, we have some of those as well. But most of the questions, as we saw, is sort of operational questions, planning questions, and project management questions. And so the members of the team is keen to get those from you. Any question goes. And look, our approach in these sessions are just see it, say it. We talk honestly. We tell you what we know. We tell you what we can tell. And if there are limitations to what we can say, we give the answers as straight as we can. If there are things we don't know, we'll say so. If there are things that are in planning process, which is not yet in the public domain, we'll say so. But we'll give you a very clear understanding of where we are, what it is we do, and why we're doing it. So thank you very much for having us. And don't hold back. Don't hold back, yeah? Ask all of the questions and we get it all on the floor tonight, and let's see how it goes. If I can introduce here from my left, Leslie will introduce herself, and then everyone from there.
Thanks. Nice to be here. My name is Leslie Wu. I'm the Chief Development Officer.
I'm Matt Clark. I'm the Chief Capital Officer.
Greg Percy, Chief Operating Officer.
And Matthew Gitzker, Chief Planning Officer.
Great. Excellent. Just before we take the first question, and again, don't be shy. Start lining up at the microphones. Also wanted to call out when we had an opportunity here earlier this afternoon. We had a terrific, a little bit more than an hour that we spent with some terrific people from the business community. All the representatives for the local chambers of commerce out in Durham region, and we had a really fantastic discussion. So thanks, sir. I see some of the folks at the back of the room, and thanks very much for taking the time again to come out this evening. Sir, first question. Perhaps tell us who you are and where you're from.
My name is Daniel Ruhel. I live in Bowmanville. I've seen there are like 2-3 questions already related to Bowmanville GO Station, so I'm sure you'll get to those. And I'm involved with RER program. I work with Infrastructure Ontario, and I'm involved with this program. But I don't really have a question. I have a suggestion. I know there are a lot of questions that are covering all the questions that I had, but I think. From Oshawa, there should be express train all the way to Union, because from Oshawa, at least, especially in the morning, the GO train is totally full. And when we stop at Ajax or Whitby or Pickering, people are basically standing. So that's just my suggestion. If it's a possibility, I know you guys are working on it. You guys are the expert. But it's just a suggestion if it's a possibility from Oshawa, if we have an express train all the way to Union.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Greg, do you want to take that question?
I thought it was a suggestion. But,
Well, that too.
but thanks, Jamie. So no, I think actually it's a good idea. But the challenge is how do you match service across 7 corridors? A lot of it's based on track capacity. So in the Lakeshore East, we are adding more track capacity, but there's still some limiting capacity in around Rouge Hill area, which when you have an express train, you also want to have all-stop trains, and you also want to have reverse direction trains. So in simplest terms, you need infrastructure that's 3 tracks wide, just to keep it simple. We don't have that all the way on the Lakeshore East. We're adding capacity. So I'd like to get to the point where we add express trains. Now, every corridor, we have 7. We'd also like express trains, reverse direction, and all-stop. We can't do all that at the same time. But certainly adding more service, we'll look at express or partial express. We wouldn't run express all the way from Oshawa, but we might partially. So those are the kinds of things we will look at, and we balance across the 7 corridors.
And Greg, it's fair to say that in our GO expansion plan, which becomes the platform from which the Bowmanville extension, which we're going to share good news with you tonight on, is the GO expansion plan has the infrastructure in the plan to get us to that extra infrastructure in terms of track. Because your suggestion on express train is really good, but keep in mind it can catch up with a slower running train. So you need, as Greg says, that extra track. And so, Greg, is that right? Am I right in saying the extra capacity?
You are right, but it does take time to get to that point. And while we're doing that, we're trying to balance service across the 7 corridors. But yes, we are trying to build the capacity to add that level of service. But I want to manage your expectations, and we're probably, I'm going to say, 5 years away from something like that.
Great. Thanks very much for your question. Not surprising, and we just put up on the screen here, when we took people that sent questions in, voted what the number 1 question was. So why don't we deal with that one right now, Phil? It's about Lakeshore East expansion to Curtis and Bowmanville. So I won't read the whole question that this gentleman had, but suffice it to say, he's been a terrific, loyal GO customer for 35 years, commuting back and forth from Toronto to Pickering, and then he moved east, and he's still looking for that. What's the plan to get GO service east of Oshawa, Phil?
So in the last 18 months, a lot of work on our side of the fence has gone into figuring out what the GO network should look like going forward. And we've shared that very publicly, and as I'm sure you're aware, you would have seen that we've published the GO expansion business case very publicly, and that's all about how we take the GO system and add the infrastructure exactly as that first question transferred to. Then there's also the extensions, and the Bowmanville extension is one of those. And as things go, we're obviously aware of the history of the ambition for this extension. and announcements that have been made in the past and all of the history behind this. And we looked very carefully as part of our process of evaluating schemes, evaluating projects, to figure out whether this Bowmanville extension fits into the overall rail network as we're going to develop it into the future. And the good news is we've come up with 4 options that suggest there's a great opportunity to extend this network from Oshawa all the way to Bowmanville. Now, I say that is a really important decision-making point because over the last year and a half, one of the things I've been intent to do in Metrolinx is not only to have more transparency such as this, but to bring rigor to our business case process. A business case process is very simple. It's about benefits and costs, and working out for each type of extension to the network, we must be sure the benefits exceeds the costs. Otherwise, it never pays for itself. And this is over a 60-year timeline that we compare the benefits and costs. So to find and to come to this community and to this region and to talk about 4 options that we can evaluate, for us is really important. And I'd like to share sort of a few observations with you about what we've also concluded. I think in the past, there has been announcements around the service being a few trains in the morning peak and a few trains in the evening peak. Our work has proven that this is just not feasible. A few trains in the morning, a few trains in the evening is never going to get the benefits that's required. So that's good news in a sense, because what we are saying is we then went and said, no, this should be an all-day service with much more regular frequency of service. And if you think of rail applications throughout the world in many different jurisdictions, people don't travel by train just for the train experience. They rarely do. There are some, but 99% of people travel on a train because it's regular, because it's frequent, because it gives them choices, gives them opportunities to get from point A to point B, and therefore trains must be reliable, safe, and run often. And so our 4 options we're going to propose to you is predicated on a full-day service. And that's even more positive, therefore. And what we found is that if you look only at a service in the morning and a service in the evening, then the benefits are never big enough. So really positive in that sense is the fact that the backbone of what we have as a GO service through this region has real potential. Then a second thing I'd like you to consider, which is positive and which we'll work into our discussions with the region and with the municipalities and the transit agencies and transit operators, especially DRT, obviously, which operates in Durham region, is that we have, over the last year and a half, reached commercial agreements on just how we operate and work with the big freight companies such as CN and CP. And so we are in a position where, working with these colleagues in the freight companies such as CNCP, we are looking at how we can expedite and quickly get some of the agreements in place around options and see what's necessary to get the service introduced as quickly as possible. And I think that's really important because, as you know, there's a significant CN track and a significant CP track that runs right through the region, very similar to where our corridor is. And so the 4 options that we'll be sharing with the region is currently in the framework of our business case analysis. We are very keen to figure out with the region how we make these options more attractive. Because when we look at business case analysis, we make assumptions on how many people are going to use the train services. But a really key part in this region is going to be what are the feed-ins of the DRT and or other innovation-driven opportunities such as Uber, Lyft, autonomous vehicle shuttles. We're not having defined list on that. But what we are suggesting is there must be many, many, many hours of effort by all of us put in with the region and with locally to look at this fantastic region, fantastic growth that you've had, and how do we reach all of the new neighborhoods that's getting built, and how do we get those people to the station locations that we have. And as we can get more riders onto the trains and to the stations through whatever innovations we come up with, the business cases will be stronger, and stronger business cases help us with the investment choices. Why do I say that? We see this throughout the region now, and we call it first mile, last mile. And what we basically mean by that is the train stops at certain stations, but there's sort of the distance from the station to someone's home we call sort of the last mile, or to work is the first mile, or whichever way around someone is traveling. And so that whole choice of where we put stations and then how we work together across the region with the municipalities and the transit authority to get that other alternative ways for people to get to stations are really important. We currently have 77,000 parking spaces on our network, and we're in the process of building 23,000 more. That's the most parking spaces owned by one transit operator in the whole of North America. We cannot keep on building parking spaces in a world that's on the cusp of changing to autonomous vehicles and then have these huge parking structures which are standing empty. So now's the time to figure out how we come up with a solution that's integrated, that works for the region and works for the society and communities. The bit I wanted to say, when I read this, I do understand, and my heart goes out to the writer of this note, and I do feel that this investment is potentially a society changer in this community. There are so many people that write to me about how far they travel, how busy the Oshawa trains are, and how much more opportunity they would like for us to have more services. What I can say to you now in a positive sense is we've taken a very careful, very studious look at all of the work done to date, very clear rigor to our business case methodology, and there are 4 options which we're going to progress with going forward. And I think that's a really good outcome.
Great, thank you. Question from the audience, please.
Hi there, my name is Jordan Hollingsworth. I am a transit enthusiast who lives in Whitby. I oftentimes, I don't work in Toronto, so I don't commute home in the evenings, but I occasionally go out in the evenings to Toronto. And a limiting factor for that has, for a long time, been the gap in train service between Oshawa at 5:45 with the next train being 6:38. It's almost an hour-long gap, whereas in the midday, you get trains running every 15 minutes. So I was just coming to ask why there is a gap of almost an hour in service between Oshawa and Pickering, because there's a train that leaves Pickering, I believe, at around 6:20 going to Union. So I just kind of wanted to know if it would be possible maybe to extend that train from Pickering to Oshawa, or any other suggestions that you guys might have to kind of fill that rather large and out-of-place gap.
Jordan, great question. Is that, Greg, you want to take that one?
Jordan, that is a good question. And we try to look at ridership and fit our train service to ridership. And there's no question right across our network, people are getting up earlier and leaving earlier, so we're putting on more train service earlier in the morning, and including our bus service too. We have some very early bus service leaving Hamilton to Toronto before 5 in the morning. So we'll take a look at that. I'm assuming my team has looked at that in terms of ridership, and is there a justification? But we'll take another look at it to see if there's a justification to do that. We are trying to, Now, how we link that train specifically becomes we run a network. So that train would then have to go somewhere else. And typically trains run about 3.5 trips a day. So that's part of the benefit of how you run it, how you justify a train or an extension. So, but we'll take a look at it and see if we can do that. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Phil, anything to add?
Yeah, John, can I just add to that? Greg is a little bit humble here, because what Greg should have added to is that Greg and his team have expanded the services across our network by 22.6% in the last year. And we measure that by seat miles. And that is number of new trains that we run, or trains that we run more miles with the same capacity. 22.6%. And by the end of this year, we should be at around 40%, not end of this year, by September. And by September next year, we'll be at 50%. So Greg and his team will, in 3 years, have increased the number of services and seats we have in service per mile by 50%. That's half, which is huge. And the bit Greg should have sort of be thumping his chest about, but he hasn't, is the fact that this year, Greg and his team increased the service on Lakeshore East to a 15-minute service. Yeah, and you're right, not for all parts of the day and the like. But here's the thing, which people don't often talk about. 15-minute service was promised for 2024. And so this was achieved nearly 4.5, 5 years early. Granted, not throughout the day, but we'll never run a 15-minute service throughout the day if the right demand isn't there. So the answer is the right one, but I think the fact that we have grown capacity on the quiet, really, even though we talk about, and Mark and his team markets it a lot, getting to the service frequency we've now has been great. And Mark, we've seen an uptake in users, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Ridership. Or go to the mic.
Absolutely. So we do have a team that today is, I would say, daily and absolutely in deep depth every month, kind of looking at the analytics. We're looking at the capacities on the train. We're looking at ridership. And we've actually seen steady growth across the last 12 months. In fact, this corridor, your corridor, is up almost 5%. And so we are always, as Greg said, working with his team to look at service patterns and service supply to meet that demand.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. Jordan, thanks very much for that question. Fantastic. Peter, do we have a question from folks watching live streaming? So this is a question coming from Jeremy. And I'll read it for everyone, for folks that can't see. From the back of the room, I'll read it out to folks. Can Metrolinx consider a partnership with Uber or other ride-sharing facility, so during service disruptions, customers can use such partnerships with a service guarantee as a chit?
I'm going to go back to the microphone. Sorry. I feel like we get to know each other very well. So some of you may be aware that we are actually piloting today a partnership with Uber, with Up Express. And the reason that we do some of these pilots is because we want to make sure that it is something that actually, if we scale it or if we roll it out across the network, that we know it's going to work. So the early indications with the Uber pilot with Up Express is that we are seeing increased ridership, because we're getting people to their home destination or wherever their destination may be in a very much a assured way. We're continuing to look at all modes, I think as Phil had alluded, of this kind of what we call first mile, last mile. How do I get to the station? How do I get from the station to wherever I want to be? And we're very much open to and exploring lots of opportunities with similar organizations to Uber. And as we progress those, the terms and conditions of them, we'll work through. But we are looking at some of the things that were suggested on the slide.
What are the
Great.
similar
I'm actually not able to share that with you because we haven't actually entered into those partnerships. But as soon as they are live, we will be sharing those publicly.
And it's public knowledge. It is public knowledge that we've went out to the market to procure, and that we've expressed very clearly what our intentions are. But we are in negotiations on final stages.
Jeremy, who watching online, thank you very much for that question. For folks who are who've just come into the room late, or folks who are watching online, what you're watching is a Metrolinx Town Hall. We've got a terrific panel of Metrolinx executives at the front, a bunch more down here. So you've seen Mark Childs, who's our Chief Marketing Officer, leap up a couple of times. So thank you very much. Next question from the audience, please.
Hello, I'm Heather Iwanu. I live in Agincourt. Behind the Agincourt GO station, my backyard backs onto the Stouffville line. Probably the Stouffville line accounts for a great many of those seat miles, Greg, because the increase in the number of trains has been exponential. The mess of our neighbourhood has been exponential. But what I'm taking back just before my question to my community is that I'm highly encouraged by what I'm hearing here tonight. However, we have our community has extreme concerns that we'd like to bring to you and perhaps share with our communities of Ajax would be on the main line. Stouffville line, the number of trains, how many, I lost track. Our major concern after 4 years of construction and mess and flooding, which we have right now, thank you, is safety for our community, safety for our children. We are a very small community, and I'm cautioning folks as this lays out. We're a very small community, a nice community. Our children walk to school, 3 schools. We have 4 grade level train crossings in our community.
I've been to each one of them.
You've actually, thank you, I appreciate it, stood in my backyard.
I have, I know which backyard is the lovely trees.
And I hate your damn wall, however, and we'll talk about that another time. But it's necessary, we understand. We've come through it, not necessarily together, but with more understanding. However, 4 grade separations, we are terrified from those grade separations. Our children walk across them. So, a few weeks ago, Anne-Marie Aiken, who is your Director of Communications or some title along those lines.
Anne-Marie,
yes, she is quoted in the Star and other newspapers as saying that there have been 12 to 15 deaths a year that Metrolinx deals with regard to trains. Look it up, I promise you, she said.
We know the stat, but those
Absolutely.
I'll clarify that.
All right. However, in our community, on our line, on Stouffville's line, there have been 5 deaths this year from last June. 5 on a small line like ours. And many, couple of reported and many unreported near misses. We are terrified of the Havendale and Huntingwood small neighbourhood crossings right through the middle of your town, and the huge Finch crossing. There are no pedestrian gates. We take pedestrian gates. We'll take anything to protect our children. My question, I was only going to ask one very quickly, and this is not quick. Metrolinx is moving ahead with this. And by the way, I drove here tonight in 25 minutes from North Scarborough. I have no other way of getting here. If I was to take GO trains, it'd take me an hour and a half, more. 20 minutes, I can get downtown, 20 minutes, but I think east and west. I can't get east and west. The world does not communicate through Union Station. So, having said that, how are you going to address the all-encompassing safety concerns of our community and indeed our greater community, which would be Ajax, Rouge Hills? How are you going to address those concerns? We'd like to know what the plan is for safety. Is there a plan? Is there a written plan? We've been asking 4 years. We have not yet seen that plan. We don't want any of our 1,600 kids who go to Agincourt, 200 who go to our little village school and 200 at the other schools. We don't want any of them on their little bikes crossing Havendale blind at that blind crossing. So do you have a plan?
Great
Yes.
questions. Phil, I think you want to probably...
Sorry, I'm going on.
No, fantastic.
Fantastic question.
Thank you.
So first of all,
By the way, I'm Agincourt Village Community Association. If anyone asks, come and go to our website, come and look at how our community.
You're looking
Thank
for
you.
new
Go
members.
ahead.
yes, it's great. And it's a great community, can I tell you that? So I've been up there, as you know,
Yep.
because it's important.
Sincerely.
It's important to see what happens and how it works, and to see what the issues are firsthand, and to hear from the residents, and it's been great. So let's take the questions in sequence, and to be absolutely unambiguous about where we are. We have a huge task of educating, I think, the world that cross railway lines, how dangerous railway lines are.
You'll never educate a
Can I-
grade 9
let me-
boy of going to
Let me follow
Agincourt.
through. Let me follow through. So the world needs to understand that trains can't necessarily be seen or heard, and that you need to be really cautious around railway lines. When you look at our level crossings, at grade crossings, they are grade controlled. And so the crossings you refer to, which are really important, are controlled. And I think that's important, because sometimes motorists think they can weave around some of the gates, and that's an unsafe practice, and that's the bit people need to understand. That is much simpler to understand than just about railways, because that's just adherence to an obvious highway regulation that explains how you should drive and not drive. So that's the part that I find worrying. Some of the near misses you refer to are what we see as inappropriate behavior around level crossings. In addition to that, one of the things I've encountered here in Canada, which has been a surprise to me, has been how open the network is around level crossings. I just didn't understand it, and I still don't. When you think of a level crossing and where the gated crossing is, what I'm proposing is that we develop a fencing system where we literally fence off the railway.
We're in.
That, yes, yeah, that's
Tell
exactly.
us about it, though.
Say again?
We need to hear this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So what we've got at 3 level crossings, so think about the other part, is when the level crossing gates are open and someone drives over the railway, what we find in many cases is that people, believe it or not, vehicles very often, and we've heard people say this, my GPS told me to turn left, but left is onto the railway, and they turn with their vehicles onto the railway, or people walk onto the railway. So what we're trialing at 2 or 3 locations, I'm not sure, Matt, Dwayne is doing it at 2 or 3 locations, 2 of our highest trespass, what we call trespass locations. We are trialing what we call cattle grids that you put in the track, that basically makes it very difficult for people to walk and to therefore veer off onto the track where they shouldn't. And as part of our program to make level crossings in the railway safe, we are busy building up a program to actually fence the railway off at all level crossings. So that is just what I would call making the railway safe. Now, when you think of frequencies of trains increasing, we track what an increased frequency of trains on a particular corridor does, and we also take census of what happens on roads that use level crossings. And keep in mind, the gated system that keeps the level crossing from being, from a car coming across the level crossing as a train approach, is triggered by the train on an automatic basis. So when those barriers go down, the railway crossing would always be safe as long as people just adhere to the rules. Now, if over time it appears that the downtime of the barriers are extensive, so you get very long queues, and that very long queues becomes a disruption for the local community, then we do invest in grade separations. And we shared we share this with communities across the GTA and GTA HA. The reason for having that type of approach is we've got many crossings, and we therefore want to have a prioritized approach to make the crossings with the highest service density grade separated first. However, when a crossing is gated, people adhere to the rules of the gating of the crossing, and it comes down, and you know the crossings that we talk about. There's a smaller arm that comes down where the pedestrians walk.
We do not have those. We have been begging for them, and nobody has. We want pedestrian gates at the very least. There are no pedestrian gates.
I thought you had.
No, we don't. Trust me, Rhoda Potter knows every square inch of our
My memory is deceiving me.
Come on along and see.
Okay, I'm going to come back.
76 Agent Court Drive. I serve tea at 3 o'clock.
I'll have it.
Thank you very much.
I'm there.
Phil, did you want to address the issue of passenger deaths? Or not community deaths?
Yes.
I just
Yes.
want to make sure you left that one. Not passengers.
This is a less enjoyable topic for discussion. The deaths you're referring to is tragic. Deaths on the railway is very tragic. Without exception from my memory, which doesn't serve me well in the earlier example, but for where I'm now, without exception, these deaths are suicides on our railway.
We understand.
And it's very tragic. We do everything to work with communities and helplines and the like to discourage people from taking their lives, especially taking their lives on our railway. And so I want to be really clear that the connection between those deaths and level crossings is not really about the operation of the level crossing.
One of the reasons we're so sensitive, and we do understand this, we have the numbers. A 6-year-old boy with his grandmother on a legal crossover. If that grandmother, I think maybe he wasn't even 6, going to one of our schools, she grabbed him, and everyone in the neighborhood still talks about that because half of them were getting on that train looking at this happening. So we have concerns about our children. We understand the numbers, but when you think that the Stouffville line is not exactly the main line, and we have 5 of any kind of deaths, the numbers don't work for us. So we'd like very much to take it up with your numbers people, and please don't send us a policeman to go talk to the kids in Agent Court Collegiate about how they should not ride their bikes across beside the tracks. So that's not enough. But however, thank you very much for...
Thank you very much.
I can take another question from the audience. Sir.
Hello, I'm Andrew Herbst. I'm a professional engineer with about 30 years experience in heavy industrial projects. And my question is basically stems from the relatively massive overrun on the Union Station revitalization project, which is also running about 4 years late, and also on the York-Spadina subway extension, which is over budget, came in late, and has been going up and down every weekend for what I would call deficiencies, but you guys are calling signal upgrades. So I applaud Metrolinx that you have an important role. The infrastructure projects, the general plan is excellent. We've got to execute it, but we can't execute it when we're going 30 or 40% over budget, 3 and 4 years late. The disruption during construction, that construction period needs to be cut down so that the disruption at the street level is reduced. And I put a question in on your webpage regarding the best practice that the Construction Industry Institute recommends called advanced work packaging. That was my plug there. It's available. You can have a look at it. My question would be, and this is probably for the planning gentleman on the right, have you looked at advanced work packaging? Have you considered piloting that in the next project of some kind? Thank you.
Andrew, thanks for the question. I thought it was going to be Matt. Is it Matthew? Who?
So before we go there, thank you very much for the introduction, but neither of those are ours. Yeah. So the York-Spadina extension is not our project, and the revitalization of of Union Station and the Bay Concourse is not ours either. City of Toronto. So I just thought I'd set the record straight. I hope that helps, but I take your point still.
I see the projects on the Metrolinx webpage. So you had some role in it, did you not, in coordinating it, or I don't know?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think you saw it on our webpage. But as it stands, can I just sort of help to clarify?
Right.
It doesn't change the nature of your question. I just thought it'd be helpful.
Right. So the real question is, have you considered, because there's infrastructure projects all over the world. I mean, the big poster boy for bad projects is the Brandenburg Airport in Berlin. It was budgeted at 600 million euros. It's coming in at 6 billion euros, and it's about 6 years late, and they don't know. It's got a deficiency list with 150,000 items on it. We can't go down that kind of path with these projects.
So, sir,
and they are complicated.
I sense the passion.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how much I agree with the sentiment you express, and Matt will talk about this somewhat. And our approach to this is projects that are sort of design, bid, build projects typically have big challenges in terms of how you control cost and scope. And we have a slightly different technique, which is called public-private partnerships, or P3s, and Matt will talk to it somewhat, and so would Mathieu.
Yeah, okay. It's a really fair comment about control of construction projects, and historically, you know, we need to look at how we deliver construction projects, particularly in the rail corridor, and particularly around Union Station, using your first example as a very complex and difficult environment to deliver building works in. At Metrolinx, we're doing a huge amount of work in advancing the way that we work with our contractors and work with the supply chain to monitor the works that are happening on site and ensure that our works are being delivered on schedule and on cost, and our performance in that area has increased hugely over the last, I'd say, 6 to 9 months. We've also introduced sponsorship within Metrolinx that ensure that we're delivering the right scope and that we're not gold plating projects, if you like, and that the projects we deliver are delivering on the benefits at the end. So touching on what Phil was speaking about there, when we look at the long-term, long-range planning of our projects, if you like, we're always assessing what the right procurement route for those projects might be. We've got a significant amount of projects being delivered under design build or design bid build and standard construction contracts, but we're also using, and we're working very closely with Infrastructure Ontario to develop AFP projects, the P3 projects, where we have an alternative financing arrangement, and that really drives performance on the bigger scale projects that we're currently delivering as part of our early works and Go expansion and RT expansion. So I'm not sure if there's, Matthew, you want to speak about planning?
I can just add maybe just a word on sponsorship to say that's something that has really changed in the past year at Metrolinx. A lot of the cost overruns you're talking about are often because we change our mind or we try to change some of the specifications when the contract's already out. And so that leads to very high cost overruns. So the big work of the sponsor office is really to make sure throughout the whole life cycle of the project to ensure that we don't go to contract before we're ready, and that we've fully done the analysis before we go out to contract, so that when the contract is out, we don't change our mind a little bit in the way to say, oh, I have a better idea now, and because that's really where a lot of the cost overruns come from. And that sponsor office is now really going through the entire project lifecycle. That means from the early planning phases to the delivery to the operations, to really assess that we're really building what we want to build, and we don't advance to the next step in terms of delivering the project before we're fully ready and all these risks are managed.
Andrew, thanks very much for that question.
Can I just add, it's excellent. Take a look, though. I think you're the right person to do it. Take a look at advanced work packaging and consider requiring it to be used by, if you're going to bid these out as design build, you can still require that it be formulated in advanced work packaging, and it'll give you the granularity you need to see what's happening at the appropriate time.
Andrew, thanks for that. Peter, do you want to bring us up another question from was voted on, submitted? So this is from Jeremy. This is dealing with our tendering status. So the individual is asking, I'm curious to know about the current status for 2 years Go pre-RER, or what we call early Go expansion tenders, as it's difficult to find comprehensive data on the state of Go expansion work in general. So he's asking about tendering status on Union Station Rail Corridor, Union Station enhancements for various platforms and like. Who'd speak to that? Is that Matt?
Yeah, well, it's good timing, this question straight after the last one, I think. So, as you can see, both projects that are referred to in that question are at Union Station. As I briefly said, Union Station is an incredibly difficult and complex place to deliver construction projects, a huge number of train movements, huge number of passengers, and we have a lot of work happening at Union Station. As Metrolinx, our number one priority while we're delivering these projects is that we deliver them safely and that we eliminate any impact on operation of the railway and disruption to passengers. So we have to keep looking at the works that we're delivering in that environment and make sure that we're not just delivering the right projects, we're delivering them at the right time. So against the package noted under Section 1 there, Union Station West Track, that tender was cancelled in fall of last year. We carried out value engineering against that package to understand the benefit it was delivering. Most of the scope will still be delivered, but it's going to be delivered as part of our major GO expansion package that we're currently talking to the market about. The second package we call USEP, Union Station Enhancement Project. It's construction of platforms at the southern side of the station and reconfiguration of track through Union. And that program and that tender is still ongoing. It has taken longer than we would have liked it to. That is primarily driven, again, by the complexity of Union Station. We had to make sure that we were very clear about how this work was going to get delivered, how it was going to get delivered safely, and coordinated with the other works that we're doing at Union at the moment, how we were going to get access to the corridor, and how we were going to access the track and minimize disruption on trains. So we've had a really good look at both of those packages, and as I said, the second package there is still progressing. As far as the point about communicating, the status of all of our works and all of our tenders, so everything pre-construction and in construction is on the Metrolinx website. We're always very keen to make sure that we're very visible and transparent about what we're doing, so it might be worth taking another look and seeing what we can do there.
Matt, thanks very much. Matt's our Chief Capital Officer at Metrolinx. Sir, next question from the mic.
Thank you for taking my question. My name's Philip. I'm from Ajax.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit, sir?
That better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. My name's Philip. I'm from Ajax. I'm also an accessibility practices student at Ryerson. My question is, what can Metrolinx do with regards to all your partners? And I'm going to be very direct about getting to Durham Region Transit. Okay, I'm also going to get on to GO Transit, TTC, and Oakville Transit. And these people all make the claim that they're compliant with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005. This is not true. As Metrolinx states on your website, you're compliant. And these people are all your partners. What can you do as far as forming a mechanism that we can report all these offenses, that we are constantly wasting our time going to these people? People have been to the Ontario Human Rights Commission. They get a little slap across the fingers. They maybe got a little bit of money, and then the offenders are free to continue to do it to the same people or other people. Again, my question is, what can Metrolinx do to hold these people who you claim are your partners accountable?
Thank you for that question. Leslie, do you want to answer that, please?
So first of all, annually we post our multi-year accessibility report with regards to our compliance with the AODA. In addition to that, Metrolinx, we know that the AODA is a minimum, and we actually have work in progress to improve our entire system up to a more accessible level. The only ability we have with regards to other operators is to facilitate and encourage. So we convene. We have a number of tables where we convene the other local operators. We share information around what we are doing. We give examples of how we are advancing our measures. But in truth and in fact, we have no mechanism to force other operators to do different than what they're doing, other than sharing the information and enabling them to know that there are many other ways of addressing the issue.
Yeah. Now, the Ontario government was supposed to lead by example. We've seen the Ontario Liberals, complete failure. I hate to say this, but it looks like Mr. Ford is following in the Liberals' footsteps. What can you do to lead by example? Look, this legislation will be 14 years old coming up in June. Okay, we have not accomplished 14 years worth of progress. Okay, we're 6 years from meeting our deadline when we're supposed to be a fully accessible Ontario. Okay, when are we going to get moving on this?
I think what I said before, I think we are making progress. We're progressing towards the deadline set by the government, and we continue to work in that way forward. I can't comment on the politics.
I would also like to sort of add to that is I sense the strong passion and feeling you have for this, and if I can share with you that if you look at what we are doing at all of the stations we build, all of the stations we're refurbishing, we have a very strong accessibility focus. We add accessibility for all type solutions at these stations. We have an accessibility working group with the communities where people that are very intimately associated with accessibility challenges advise us, participate with us, help us with decisions. I've sat in several of these meetings. We take away operational lessons, we take away behavioral lessons, the understanding we develop from someone that sits in that working group that's wheelchair bound with limited ability to do anything else but do what the wheelchair allows, advising us how to think about accommodating wheelchairs on our transit system, people with restricted eyesight and helping us to understand what to do with regard to making it more possible and more pragmatic for them to get around our system. We learn from this, and we do quite a lot of this. We work continuously at getting better, and I think it's a very, very much an organizational initiative. And Mathieu, your team is involved. You've got one of your team lead in that.
Yeah, just to add that in terms of leading by example, as you said, I think one of the objectives that we're working hard on is what we call universal access and universal design. There, the idea is to make sure that all the effort that we're going to make for accessibility really benefits a lot of different kinds of disabilities and also all of the riders, because a lot of accessibility solutions actually benefit a lot of riders when you have luggage, when you have younger kids, when you're walking with strollers. So a lot of accessibility issues are also just common sense for a lot of different riders. And a lot of that work on universal access is to make that design progress so that we can, at every station, make the right kinds of efforts to get the solutions both for people with very different types of disabilities and just to make traveling easier for many different kinds of riders.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. If we can, tremendously important. If you'd like to stay after and talk to folks, that'd be great. But if we can keep moving along, sorry, we've got a lot of people in line here. Thank you, sir. Next question.
So first of all, thank you for coming tonight out to Durham. Glad to have you here and answering our questions. So thank you for that. I ride Durham Transit as part of my job. It's not my job. That's just what I do to get to my job. So I'm one of your last mile people when I do get on. And I'm fascinated by that because my sense is in the Durham region on the east side that we're a bit of a poor cousin when it comes to other communities that I see around. My father lives in Kitchener, has a lovely LRT going up and down King Street. My brother lives in Ottawa, has a lovely bus-separated area. We have now yellow buses, so we've got the paint piece coming together in Whitby, but I don't feel like we really have a vision in our area, in the east, of what transit looks like off of the main rail line. If I miss my bus from work on a major thoroughfare, I stand beside a telephone pole for 28 minutes. I know that's not happening in Toronto. And I think people would be a little upset if it was happening in Toronto. My question to you, and I won't go on and on, is what kind of investments and thought is going into the last mile Durham Region transit model? Because I don't believe there's enough happening there. And if there was ever a good time to do it, it's right now where we're already tearing everything up and building all these new homes. I'd love to see those infrastructure pieces going in now, rather than 15 years when we have to tear apart everything to put all that stuff in because we're now too big and we need that kind of transit. And I just worry that we're missing a golden north-south and east-west opportunity because more and more of us are actually working here. I get that there's a lot of people going in, totally get that, but I almost want to say until Toronto figures themselves out, we're happy to take their money.
No,
Great comments and questions.
it's a DRT. Yeah.
So we're working very closely with Durham Region Transit to find the right solutions at the right scale. So you're right for that kind of the bigger scale of moving in north, south, or east, west, but not into central Toronto. Right now, so in the regional transportation plan, there are 2 bus rapid transit projects that have been identified. And so right now on the first one, which is the east-to-west connection from Durham to Scarborough, so we're actually leading the business case work in the second stage, where we're looking in detail at how that can be designed, where are the pinch points to get the fastest and the most effective way of investing that money on that east-west connection. And later, there will be work on a north-south connection on Simcoe BRT, which had been identified in the plan. So these are for kind of the longer distance, I would say, journeys that start in Durham or end in Durham, and with the granularity that you need so that you can actually get to places which are not necessarily going through Union Station. And then there's a lot of work on the first and last mile, as you said, just to work with Durham Region to try to find what are the right solutions for that access to the GO station, to find when, and this is with a lot of analysis of where the riders are and what we need, how fast do we want to go, and the interaction between what the GO bus system can offer and what the local buses can offer. And that's work that's ongoing, that will continue as service ramps up, because as the train service continues to ramp up, I think that will be even more important. But it does make, when service ramps up, actually it makes our life a bit easier, because when you have a train every 30 or 40 minutes, or when you have a gap or a 50-minute gap between 2 trains, synchronization between the local buses and the train is actually quite complicated, because if you miss your train by a few minutes with that bus, then you're stuck. As soon as you get to 15-minute service, it's much better to synchronize the general. You don't have to actually synchronize it by 2 minutes, and if you miss your train, you have another one within 13 minutes or 12 minutes, and that makes a big difference. And this is why there's a lot of work going on with the local transit.
But those are for the long-distance services. What you refer to your first mile, last mile, is it Durham Regional Transit choice, a Durham Regional Transit solution? And I think we have great empathy for how big a region the DRT is trying to cover and what frequency of services one can operate. And this is challenging, and we understand it. And our colleagues in the DRT, who we work with on all of the planning issues on the backbone services that Mathieu has referred to, we work very closely with them. But the world is sort of changing, and we need to, and this is part of the challenge that we had in the earlier conversation on the Bowmanville Railway extension. We need to figure out how together with the DRT and our DRT that looks after that first mile, last mile part that you referred to, how we can get services that can feed into the, let's call it the thicker feeder pipelines, such as the rail pipeline, or as Mathieu has said, the BRT or bus rapid transit that runs between Oshawa, that we're not runs yet, that we're going to build between Oshawa and Toronto. And so those feeder pipes need to have different ways of picking up first mile, last mile. And you're absolutely right. If you have to wait an hour or half an hour, it's not a compelling value proposition anymore. And so we are thinking along this space of autonomous shuttles and how they can be more effective and efficient. They can be deployed, actually.
Great questions. Peter, do we have another question from the live stream? So this is from Simon. Simon's asking, with the ongoing Presto deployment for the TTC system, how will tourists and infrequent users will be able to pay their fare once the fare collector booths are phased out? I'm going to ask Annalise, who's our Executive Vice President of Presto, to answer that question.
So that's a great oh, there we go. That's a great question from Simon. So we're actually at the beginning of a pilot phase of single-use tickets for the TTC. We have 2 stations that are currently selling Presto tickets, which are loaded with a 2-hour ride, so a single ride, or 2 2-hour rides, or a day pass. They're currently being sold at 2 stations only, just to make sure that everything's working well. That said, if they're bought, they can be used throughout the TTC. So the intent of that is to, exactly as Simon says, to be used for infrequent users for whom a Presto card may be less attractive, or potentially for someone who potentially loses a card often and doesn't want to pay the $6 frequently. And likewise for tourists who may come and only need a day pass, for instance. So we're doing that, and over the next couple of months, we'll be expanding that pilot to all the subway stations in terms of sales, but then also throughout all the shoppers in the City of Toronto, so that people in Toronto can use them. That said, I want to caution folks who don't live in Toronto that Presto tickets are only for the TTC, and so they don't allow for cross-agency transfer into Durham, for instance. And so we really encourage everyone to get a Presto card, because that's where you get the best value for your money and also the lowest price.
Annalise, just before you
Yes.
step away from the mic, so you did that very quickly on what a single-use ticket is. Can you
Yes.
just physically explain to people physically what
I
it
can
looks like,
show-
feel like, how it's made? You may even have one. Because the reason why we
your
asked
scarf.
this
There
is
you go.
this is not really people don't necessarily understand it.
So yeah, it's real. Actually, I'm not holding my actual Presto card right now, but the normal Presto card that's green or black, as the new branding has, is reusable and has a little chip inside. This actually isn't loaded with anything on it, but this is a real Presto ticket. So it's a paper ticket. It's kind of a plasticized paper, and it's got the actual chip and the electronics inside. It's unfortunately not recyclable because the electronic chip inside doesn't allow for that. And so it's not something we really want to overly encourage, because really for sustainability and price reasons, the reusable plastic card is really better. But that said, there are folks for whom the reusable card isn't ideal. And so this was something that we've been developing at the request of the TTC. And that said, I also wanted to encourage that, that we're not only stopping there, we're also thinking about the future of Presto and hopefully moving over to mobile payments as fast as we can, because that's really what we think is cool and next in terms of being able to use your phone to pay, and likewise looking at the future of being able to tap with a credit or debit card onto a reader and so on. So we're really keen, we're working on a plan to modernize, but for now, this is the next thing to come.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Annalise.
Simon, thank you for that question, and thank you for watching online. Next question from the audience, sir.
Hi there. My name is Jason. I am from Oshawa. My question, I'm going to touch on 2 subjects, actually. So you're going to, it's double-tracked between Rouge Hill and Scarborough-Guildwood, right? And you're going to expand to Bowmanville, which I love, which is great. I want to talk about train traffic. If you're going to start siphoning more trains into a double-tracked section, because you're supposed to double-track all the way to Bowmanville, if I'm correct, right? Am I wrong?
Yes.
Yes.
I say yes. Part of the optioneering is to go and look at what the existing service pattern is and the existing infrastructure is.
Well, the CP line running through Oshawa is an active freight line. It's not like the Stouffville line.
No, we understand.
Right? So
you're both lines are active.
Yeah, you're probably, well, Stouffville was almost dead when you guys took it over, right? I mean, there's another line up to Peterborough as well that you could use. So you're going to have to double track. So you're going to add more trains in the morning running southbound. They're going to start bottlenecking because there's going to be too much traffic on the line. So how are you going to solve that problem? And number 2, you guys are going to inherit the subway pretty soon. So if you're expanding to Richmond Hill, you guys know already that the problem on the subway system is capacity, and that they can't put any more trains on the line hence automatic train control. So, you know, you're gonna might have that option or that problem in the east very soon. So why didn't you use the CP line all the way to Toronto? And instead you're gonna double track from Oshawa all the way, build a bridge over the 401. That's gonna cost a lot of money. What type of delays is the community gonna expect with this new service? Is it gonna be that great? And why didn't you take advantage of the CP line running across the city at the top?
Get your CV to us. We want to recruit you as a planner. Yeah. So you asked a lot of super intelligent railway questions there. We're going to try. Between myself and Greg, we're probably going to try and answer most of them. So let's do some of that in sequence. And if we miss a trick, then call us out.
No problem.
Firstly, single line track doesn't have to be double tracked in order to get passing loops. I know you know. Many parts of the railway, we look very carefully. If we look at the Barrie feed, we look at, on the Barrie corridor, we look at especially the northern end of the route, we're going to double track quite a lot of it. But there's going to be sections where we can have passing loops or loops at stations. You're probably going to say, because you know what you're talking about, the next issue is, but if you have a passing loop at the station, the train needs to wait in station for the approaching train to pass, all of that's true.
So who would have the right of way? Metrolinx or CN or CP?
Yeah, well, the elegance is that on our network we own, we probably have right of way, and we always do that. On track and that's owned by a freight operator, it's natural that they would have right of way, it's their property. Other jurisdictions, how it works is that consider the train with the highest value, typically by revenue, is considered the one with preference. We're not in that space with the regulatory framework and the ownership framework we have here. The really challenging thought, which Greg will respond to as well, is that's a very innovative thought, the one that you had and still have there about how to intelligently use existing infrastructure lines, such as the CP line, and how it crosses through Toronto.
It goes through Leaside. Right?
Yeah, throughout, and even
right past the crosstown.
Even you one step ahead of us. Yeah. Even the same logic about track that exists in this region, we have the same thinking that based on the frequency of use at what, and even though it's an active freight corridor, there are choices you can make to make sure you can run a service within a window of time. If you think of a certain distance, as you know, speed of train, then you can get so many trains through in an hour. And then if you every 2 or 3 hours have a freight train come past, you can, what we call, regulate the service around that. Your questions, though, are very pertinent, and it's very much about the utilization of existing assets.
Yeah, basically the double track area. Like I predict a big bottleneck there if you're going to add trains. Trains will be stuck on, because it's signalized. They're going to be stuck on one side or the other.
Many jurisdictions in the world don't double track everywhere. You signalize, but you can signalize around single track and passing loops as well as along double track. It's all about the freight density and the train service density that you have. That drives the decision to double track. Greg.
Sure. So there were several questions in there, so let me tackle some of them. So you talked about the north route of CP, and I'm assuming you're not talking about the really north route through Peterborough and Havelock, because that's off the table right now. But you're talking about the North Toronto subdivision, which runs through mid-Toronto and goes across sort of through Etobicoke in that kind of area. So that's already at capacity with CP Freight. So we have not approached them. Now, if they ever get to the point of selling that corridor, we'd be interested. But at this point, it's not for sale, and it's a main line for them. They've shut down other routes to redirect freight onto that corridor, such as through Montreal. They had it's called the Ottawa subdivision. They closed that 15 years ago and routing all the Montreal traffic now over that corridor. So it's very full, and there's no room for us. So there's also an advantage to operating over that corridor, which you own. So we do own from basically Oshawa in to Union Station. We own 80% of our operating network. So, and that wasn't an accident. We did that on purpose. We're starting transition dispatching of our trains on our own corridors late this year, and we'll be finished by the end of the following year. All of a sudden now we both own and dispatch over our own corridor, so that means we set priority, and that becomes strategically very important. Not that we would abuse the privilege, but we'd have to balance the freight, via, and GO service. And this dovetails into the question, the very first question of the evening, about express trains. So it's all about capacity. We actively manage capacity every single day, pretty much 24/7, 365, that's what we do. And you optimize across all of those things. It's also important to move freight. So we're not here to say we're going to move commuters and park the freight trains. Not going to do that, because the economy of Canada is based on moving freight trains efficiently as well. So our challenge is to optimize all that stuff. So you're right, there's a narrowing of track in around Rouge Hill, and we made a purposeful decision not to widen the track at that point because it was going to be cost prohibitive. But what we can do is manage through that area, and we've already planned to do that. So we actually are pretty good at that.
Jason, great questions. Thank you. And don't forget to give Phil your resume.
Thank you for that question.
We've got about 15 minutes left, and so if we get, and by my count, we've got about 5 people at least standing at the microphone. So fast questions, fast answers, folks.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my question. My name is Ron, and I'm from Whitby. My question relates to active transportation and supporting active transportation at the GO stations. Today, we see very little active transportation support at the GO stations. Mr. Vestre, you talked about the future with DRT, Lyft, Uber, autonomous vehicles. You didn't mention active transportation.
I missed it off. I apologize.
You talked about 77,000 parking spots and building another 23,000 parking spots at an average of what, 40,000 a spot?
Yeah.
You can park 12 bikes in one of those spots. So the question is, how are you supporting active transportation? Because right now cyclists cannot get into a GO station safely. And how are you working with municipal partners to build the infrastructure to support the first mile, last mile for active transportation?
Great questions. Mathieu?
Fantastic question.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we all know, and I mean, Phil mentioned that we can't grow the parking anymore, and there's still a lot of parking that will be built, but we have to, the objective is to really get as many different kinds of people with different kinds of options to get them safely to the GO stations. So as you mentioned, I mean, we have station access plans that are connected to the GO expansion program. So every station, we look at the potential ridership in the up to 2041, 2031, and for those, we look at what kind of mode share is going to be needed in the future to be able to get all of these riders to the trains and to the frequency of the trains that will be along Lakeshore East and along all the other corridors. So for a lot of stations, that does mean being able to develop active transportation, safe access for pedestrians and for cycles, and in addition to autonomous vehicles, more pickup and drop off, more easier access for carpoolings and things like that. So we look at the whole range of solutions to access that station. And you're absolutely right. That's based on a partnership with our municipal partners. So looking really at the local connectivity and right now what we're trying to do is to think really to really put ourselves in the feet of the user, of the customer, to say, how do they get through from their municipal, from wherever they live, where there's sidewalks, what is their itinerary through kind of the municipal access to the station, and then through the station to make sure that their entire journey is safe. And then provide services at the stations to enable cyclists, for example, to park their bikes in a way that's comfortable for them. So depending on, some users will be comfortable parking their bike on an open bike rack. Some people will prefer a closed one with a level of security that's a bit higher, so because they don't want their bike to be stolen at the parking at the station. And so we're developing at each station that whole range of solutions to make sure that all our customers have a lot of different options to get there safely.
Okay, but Matthew, I can just take the station. Our walk from the station tonight was terrible. Mm-hmm. That's our station.
That's right.
And I walk
right here.
And I'm a proud non-owner of a car. I don't own a car. I walk, I Uber, I Lyft, I use TTC, I use DRT, I use GO, I travel public transit. That's who I am. And I'm uncomfortable walking from the station to here. I just hold my hands up to that. We have not made our stations active travel friendly. So
No, you haven't.
Matthew gives a long answer, but the short answer is it's not yet where I want it to be.
And just in the interest of time, Matthew, afterwards, if we can find out how we access your future plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ron, thanks very much. Next question from the mic.
Hi, good evening. My name is Althea, and I'm from Whitby. And I have a lot of questions, but the two, the most important ones for me anyway, are the new seats on the GO train. I don't know who decided on these chairs. They are the most uncomfortable chairs to sit on. When you have people waiting for the train at the GO stations going, not the new trains, not the new trains, not the new trains, because nobody wants the new seats because they're very uncomfortable and you're literally straddling the person sitting in front of you. Extremely comfortable. And the other issue I have is when we're in the new cars, I find there's a lot of jerking, like extreme jerking to the point where people are actually nauseous when we get off at Union. And I've actually called a number of times. I've gotten to the point where I actually take the number of the car so if there's an issue, I call it in. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that do not like these new chairs. I'm just hoping that we won't be using them moving forward because they are absolutely uncomfortable. And I know I did see a question about that online.
Althea, great question. Greg,
So
you're responsible.
I'll take the jerking question, and Mark will take the seat question. Okay, so the jerking is not the coach, it's the train. The coaches are all connected to each other. What we do have is, because we're growing so quickly, is we're staffing up the trains through our contractor Bombardier. They're training people, they have trainees and qualified people beside them. And it takes a while for these folks to learn how to operate a train of that length, of that mass, and how to brake properly. We're teaching them, reteaching them, we're telling them to brake earlier, brake softer. It takes a little while. But and that's not an excuse, it's actually the reality. So it takes a little while for them to get used to that, but they will.
And we own that and we wear that.
Yep.
Even though they work for Body, they are our people. So that's our staff, our responsibility. And so we take your point on that. I've seen it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Greg, it's kind of like my 16-year-old daughter's learning how to drive, right?
I can't speak to that.
Okay.
Hi.
Mark.
Hi.
So we're gonna do a little quick conversation. So on the seats, first of all, thanks for the feedback. You're not alone in sharing your feedback, and we did hear everybody. And actually, towards the end of late summer, we actually, if you had been traveling into Union, you may have seen a setup of a number of seats where we invited our customers, just like yourself, to actually not only try the seat which was hidden, the one that you've been using and the one you've described, but also some alternates. And I can share with you that we have the research findings, which are absolutely going to be used as we move forward, as we think about new vehicles and new fleet, particularly as we think about Go expansion. What I can tell you, there are 3 parts of a seat that everyone is divided on. So as it relates to the cushion, we heard categorically, no, people want a softer seat to sit on. So you're okay. We've got 2 other. We can play rock, paper, scissors. Actually, that's a good one. So the headrest we hear is probably mixed. It's about 50-50, and I'm going to be honest with you, it depends on how tall you are and where your head sits in that headrest. So we've taken that learning. The third element was the armrests, and we heard that there's really no difference there, whether it's the fabric that it's made of or the material that it's made of. So we've definitely heard lots of comments. We've done the research. We know what we need to do moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Mark,
very much.
thanks. Althea, thank you. Next question, sir.
Hello. Thanks for hosting this town hall today. I really appreciate you guys coming out. I have 2 quick questions I was going to ask you. The first one is, surprisingly, it didn't make the list. Can you guys explain why the pay went up for the GO train, whereas from Gilwood to Union, the pay dropped? Like
the fares?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yep.
The GO fares dropped, whereas ours went up. Whereas from Gilwood to Union, they have the option of TTC, but we don't have any other option except the 401. So we're just wondering why that price went up, and also why the children ride free. And can you just confirm that we're not subsidizing the children riding free and the people that live closer to Union Station? Because their fares dropped quite a bit, but ours went up, like it's only 4%, it's only cents, but when you add it up every day, every month, every year, It's substantial for like a lot of people. And my second question, and I'm going to make it quick for my friends here behind me. Can you just answer question number 7 on this sheet as to
we'll
why
get to
there's
that.
no train between 3:15 and 4 o'clock? I'm not sure if you guys have ever taken that 4 o'clock train, but a lot of my friends here have, and it's a disaster. Like, the train is always packed. People can't make it when they run over the big bridge at Pickering. There's no room on the platform, and if you look at all the train schedules before and after, it's like every 15 minutes or every half hour, but except that one time, which is during rush hour.
So we're going to get to the question on fares. We'll get to the question on fares, and then we'll bring up question 7. So
on fares, just a clarification. So the fare, when you think of our Go fare, there's a sort of a base fare that we charge when you get on a train and travel. And then when you travel further and further, you pay increasingly more because of the distance you travel. And so the way that you ask the question is very, very helpful for us, because we've been trying to explain what we have done with the base fare reduction. And if I could explain it just ever so quickly. So the base fare reduction is to reduce the base fare from $4.70. In other cases, some cases it's higher, but base fare, depending on where you are in a fare zone, but roughly from $4.70 to $3.70 is by $1. That is from where you get on a train within 10 kilometers. So even if you get onto a train anywhere else in the network and you get off at the next station within 10 kilometers, you get the benefit. And so sometimes that is interpreted as people in Toronto gets a discount because it's there where stations are much closer to each other and many more opportunities to travel short distances. That's not really accurate at all. From wherever you get on, even if the next station is, say, 11 or 12 or 13 kilometers away, your base fare ramps up from that very low level that the base fare is dropped down to and taken up and then goes up. So that's a bit of a technical explanation, but tell me why. Let me tell you why we've done this. The biggest strategy for Go is to put more capacity, run more trains, more frequency as we build out the network in the coming years. And a couple of people here have said it already. Union is not the end of the destination. Union is not where everyone travels. So we have deliberately reduced the base fare to encourage people to take shorter journeys. So how many people today travel from Whitby to Ajax? Well, we can say some. Great, fantastic. Travel more.
Yeah. That's Jordan. There we go.
We want many, many more people to do that. You know, people that travel from Downsview Park to Aurora. Those short journeys are really, really important because we can have all of these trains and capacity run up and down. We don't want the only users to be commuters that travel all the way down to Union and all the way back in the afternoon. So that's the reason why we've reduced the base fare, so that we encourage local travel solutions more. And then I have to agree with you. You know, the fare increase, I can understand. The fare increase for long distance affects prices. We've kept it for 18 months. We've had no increase. So it's on an annualized basis, it's significantly less than inflation. We reflect the costs that we have in terms of fuel costs and the like. Now, our fuel cost estimate alone over the period has gone up by 8%. We didn't pass 8% onto our riders. And I can tell you, we've got a very significant program, and Justina there, Justina can talk somewhat about our cost reduction program for this year, which is very challenging. Justina, do you want to give a sense?
I am the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. So a few things I wanted to share with you. So for example, in terms of the cost savings, we were asked by our government to cut our operating costs by $50 million just in our fiscal 19-20 alone. So this is really a huge exercise for us. And also something that I also wanted to share with you. So what it does really, as you know, we really don't make money. We really need government to help us and give us subsidy to operate the transit. We actually reduce the subsidy that we ask government to help us really to operate the network by 32%. So again, we are doing everything to really be cost efficient. I lead finance. We really challenge every business unit on a periodic basis. They really have to explain the targets. They are given saving targets. For example, Greg's division, which is really operating, had to deliver $30 million in operational savings without incurring any times of decrease in service. So again, we are trying to be cost efficient, but again, certain changes and fare increases are necessary.
Thanks,
the one question that the gentleman asked we didn't get to is kids go free. Do you want to talk to that, or Mark, do you want to talk about that? The issue of
kids go free.
Look, I'm meeting everybody in person. Mark, that's me. Actually, kids, I would say absolutely categorically, the fare increases that we have just announced and that you're experiencing are not subsidizing kids. I can share with you that we actually, since March of last year, we actually ran the pilot of Kids Ride Free on the Berry line. And we actually were able to categorically and definitively use analytics to confirm that it actually raised ridership. When we allow kids to travel for free, transit becomes a much more real option for families to travel competitively versus potentially taking the car. And what we were able to analyze was that the increased ridership was significantly more than offsetting the cost of kids not paying, almost to like a 9-to-1 ratio.
Can Greg respond to the 3:15 and the 4 o'clock train?
Sure. So a 45-minute gap, we'd like to narrow that down, and we will keep looking at ways to get towards a 15-minute service, but we're not there yet. We've just added this past year 22.6% more service across the board. That's a lot of service. We're going to look to add another 15% this year. So we work it into the mix because we have to balance the increased service across 7 different corridors. And so we also track the capacity by train. So when you say it's full, I believe you, but we actually have the stats for that. And we will compare that against being over capacity in some others. So we're trying to get there. We're trying to add more service. We're trying to narrow the gaps between trains. 45 minutes is a bit longer than I would prefer. So it's on the radar.
Great.
I miss that 3:15 train, I have to wait till 4 o'clock to get home after putting the full shift in hospital. I don't think that's acceptable.
Okay.
So that's fantastic feedback because there are many customer groups that travel and many times that they travel during the day. And we look, in a sense, we have only so many trains that we can operate, and we look very carefully where we deploy those. But feedback such as the one you've given is really useful. And after we hang back, after the conversation, please share that with us some more because, and I say this very courteously, there are as many people that would say to us, a later train, I don't want a later train because 3:15 suits me well enough and I want to travel at 3:15. And so what we do is we look at what's the loadings and the boardings of every train, what's the demand. And as demand shifts during the day, we also shift our train pattern. And this is why coming out here and listening to you is so helpful, isn't it? Because you've now said something with so much passion. I'm going to remember that, and we're going to figure out what, are there enough people that want to do that? If there aren't, I can tell you we're not going to change it. Because we can't run trains, even if there are 100 or 500 people. What do you follow? It gets to a point where it becomes something that we can afford to take a train away from somewhere else to run it over here. But thanks for that input.
So we've extended a little bit over time, but I'm totally respectful that we've got 3 people still in line, so we'd like to take your questions.
My name is Jim Boat. I'm a member of the Durham Region Cycling Coalition. I'm also a real interested member of active transportation in the region of Durham, and more specifically, a member of the Active Transportation and Safe Roads Committee in Clarington. And before I get to my question, which you partly answered, and I'll be short, I'd like to give a shout out to my mayor and councillors and many more members of the municipality of Clarington that have done everything, including standing on their heads, to get Metrolinx rail transportation out to Bowmanville. My question, which another member asked just a few minutes ago, talked about the last mile. Is Metrolinx going to be a full working partner with the municipalities of Clarington and Oshawa at helping create safe bicycle routes to the 4 suggested new stations? And would those routes be safe routes, not necessarily a paved shoulder? And would the location at the stations have safe parking, which would be protected from the weather? Thank you very much.
Matthew? Short answers?
Short. Yeah, so very short. Yes, we will work with the municipalities. We're working on everyone, but I take your point, and we'll definitely give it a very specific look. But that's part of our overall strategy. So, and absolutely yes.
Great, Matthew.
Jim, thanks for the questions, and for those folks that missed it, apparently Mayor Foster is going to stand on his head later for us. Next.
Adrian, can I just be clear? We are full partners, but you fund it.
Next question, ma'am.
I really want to see him stand on his head. My name is Beth. I'm from Oshawa. Nobody's asked the question so far as when is the expansion going to happen? This has been on the books since, well, the big move has been on the books since 2011. Go Alert's been on the books a whole lot longer than that, and that was crossing the 401 at Stevenson Road to get onto the CP line. When is this going to happen?
Start a little bit in a different space, and then I'm going to sort of give you the answer, if that's okay. In the world we live in, people sometimes express a lot of ambition in terms of when they want things to happen, long before business cases and the facts and the procurement process and the market and everything like that has been resolved to say when something can be done. And we live in that space as transit people. We get set targets and we work to deliver those in the best possible way. And if I give you just a few practical examples, I think I shared with a group earlier that the commercial work we've done with some of the freight operators have allowed us in some cases to deliver solutions 4 years sooner than what was the aspiration of a date of delivery. So it can work in a positive way, depending on what the circumstances is, what the nature of the service is, what the commercial deals are that you can make with people who own that piece of track. Because in many cases, we own 80% of our track and 20% of our track. Very often, critical parts of our track is owned by someone else. So we own everything up here to Oshawa, for example, but we don't own the remaining parts. So in terms of the 4 options, some of those options require infrastructure work, build work, more than other options. As a rough indication, I have an aspiration that with our commercial agreements to be made with operators out there, freight operators, it would probably take a shorter period of time than if we have to go and build stuff. Building stuff takes longer. You need to go to market. You need to procure. You need to procure the services of a construction entity. We'll probably do this as a public-private partnership, given the significant value of what such an investment would be for some of those options. That would take time. And if you have an intransigent freight operator that you're dealing with, intransigent not in a bad way, intransigent in the sense that, no, that's an important line for us, we don't want to share it with you, then those negotiation timelines are longer. I am not committing to a timeline on this conversation because we have so much that needs to be refined. We need to open negotiations with CN on some of the options and with CP on the other options. The 4 options uses both those lines. We need to do a lot of work to get this right. But what I can say is, from the momentum that we have, and The guidance government has given us to proceed with this discussion tonight and in the future, the momentum is significant. I've given indication in a telephone conference to the mayors, and I can see they weren't pleased. That's why they're standing in a row there. They're going to probably corner me on my way out and hit me over the head. But in a conversation with the mayors, I gave an indication of how keen we are for Mathieu and his team to come across, talk to DRT, talk to the transport planners, and to move the 4 options forward to see how we can maximize the benefits of each and come up with a final selection choice, which we can then take back to the Treasury Board and to government for a decision. And if you are in this cycle and you get to a point where you get that decision, you are then roughly in a 2 to 3 year procurement and design phase and a 3 to 5 year build phase. Well, if I follow through, that's if you are building. That's the expensive option for building. If you are in a contract negotiation phase and you have just station buildings you're putting up, that time duration can take less. And that's just the facts of the matter.
Okay, thank you. Is there any thought of not buying the land for stations, but renting it instead?
Fantastic question. Yes, you're absolutely right. The issue here really is not the procurement of the land. If we need land around stations, and it is strictly for transit purposes, we can expropriate it. It takes as long as it takes to buy it. We can take an easement on it. Easement means the landowner keeps the land and we just take a right to build on it and we pay for that easement. So that's not so much the issue. The issue really, to be unambiguous about it, is the rail corridors. The rail corridors are the lifeline of the freight companies. And if I share with you the freight companies' time horizon, many of us have dealt with CNCP. They are colleagues, and I want to just share with you how crucial their decisions are on capacity. They don't have a 20-year vision on capacity of their corridors. They have a 120-year vision of their capacity. They make decisions about what capacity needs to be 120 years from now. The shareholder value in these companies is all about the capacity and the corridors they've got. It's the gold. It's the gold in these companies, is where their routes run and what capacity they've got. And what we are saying to them is, I see you're not using all of that capacity. Can I have some of it? You follow? And so that's where there's this difficult commercial conversation, where they have a view that once they give us some capacity, they'll never get it back. I mean, CP or CN would be in a position where if they ever have to come and face a community like you and say, we're running more freight services, so that's why your train services into Toronto has been stopped, because we've taken the rights of Metrolinx away. They know how difficult a decision that would be. So they are very protective of their capacity, as you and I would be if that was our business.
Okay. Yes. Thanks for the fantastic questions. I want to recognize Mayor Mitchell from Whitby, who's joined us. Oh, Mayor Mitchell, sorry, I'm looking at the back there. Final question from the audience, sir.
Hello. I am a member of the media, and I am able to get a hold of your people quite quickly. But as you mentioned, the mayor's here probably had some questions, and I've also talked to our MPP, Jennifer French, on a number of times, and she says information isn't always readily available.
Sorry, what information are you referring to?
On the status of this expansion. So my question is, what is the best way for people to get update information on this? And are you willing to come back and do town halls like this, say every 6 months or in a year, to update people?
So I think it's reasonable to say that the status of this extension was under review and was on active review over the last couple of months. And we have given it very careful consideration, because we had to figure out what are the real options here and what's the business case that sits behind this. And from this point onwards, it's a very transparent process from us dealing with the Durham region and with Durham Region Transport. So I dare say access to information will be easy to get. We have Ask Metrolinx open sessions as this in the region over here and in other parts of the region as well as in Toronto. So keep an eye on the website, and you're welcome to either live stream in or ask your questions remotely or attend any of these sessions.
Okay. I have 2 follow-up questions that you can answer.
So we're running out of time.
With a yes or no answer.
Okay.
Will we ever see 24-hour train service, even on a pilot project?
Actually, I don't understand.
24-hour train service.
Oh, nighttime. Oh, depends if the demand is there.
Okay. And Wi-Fi on trains, where are we with that?
It's coming.
It's coming.
By when?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Everyone, that draws this evening
Thank you very much.
to close. Just remind everyone again, thank you very much for your comments, your feedback. We take it all very seriously. If you've got further questions, please submit them online. We will answer all your questions, and we'll publish that on our website. Thanks again, and get home safely.